The hell was that? All right, this is Sports for Real with Coach Hall. Trying to get set up here. It's kind of a cumbersome experience here. But I just wanted to come home, sitting here watching Grambling State in a cat fight with Montana State. And it makes me put me in the mind of thinking about the NCAA tournament and how they seem to put things together. You know, they have this thing called the First Four. I don't know how long it's been out, but it's been about 6, 7 years now when they expanded the tournament from 64 to 68. 64 was a nice round number, but of course, it wasn't enough money. So let's see if we can make some more money out of this product we have here. So when we have our 64, we've had teams that got left out that was worthy of the tournament, but because they have to accept these smaller conferences, a lot of people were complaining. So to make people happy, they expanded it 4 teams. You think that will help the little guy, but no, 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 no. You get more big guys in the tournament. And then we can take these small schools and focus, showcase them in the first four. That way we can get rid of them and still have more big schools in the tournament. And I think that's the reality of what you're seeing now. And until somebody proves me wrong, I'm going to go with that. But having said that, Grambling, they having their troubles with Montana State. And then last night, Howard, he fought back in the end, ended up losing a heartbreaker to Wagner. So that's two HBCU teams gone right out of the gun. They're gone. And I think certain people want it that way. So now you're going to get what you really wanted to see certain programs making it to the Final Four. We're already talking about how certain programs, when they are put on the bubble, you would think that they wouldn't make the tournament at all. But if they did make the tournament, then they're going to be a very low seed. Why wouldn't they be a 15, 16 seed if they didn't deserve to be in the tournament? Why is it that all of them somewhere anywhere from a 9 to a 12 seed if they're on the bubble? I don't seem to be able to make much sense out of that other than the fact that what I started out the show with by telling you that they don't really want these small schools there. But be that as it may, that's the way things are. But today I really want to talk about the Iowa women's basketball. People are complaining that they got screwed. Iowa is the number 1 seed, and people are congratulating them for that. But when they look at the road that they have to face to get to the Final Four, they say, "Whoa, you're doing these girls wrong." And I say, perhaps, but not really. Why? Because I've seen this thing before. First, before I get too deep into why I'm saying that, Iowa, they're gonna have to win their region, and they're probably gonna end up matching up with LSU in the regional final, which was the fourth national championship game last year. And if they somehow get by that, then they're probably going to run into South Carolina for the championship. They beat South Carolina last year, so you know South Carolina, they kind of like to see Iowa this year because they're playing some good basketball, especially Raven Johnson. Raven Johnson probably has a lot to prove again if they were to play against Iowa. But before they even get to LSU, there are a couple of teams in there that can knock them off. Kansas State has already done it, and Colorado and UCLA just wait for a chance to do it themselves. But I think when you look at the bracket, it puts me in the mind of they kind of brought this on themselves. To explain, let me go back 34 years, well, 33 years. Back in 1990, UNLV the men's basketball team, they were loaded. They made it to the championship game finally, and I say finally because this is one of those programs that they're always good, but they always find a way to blow it somewhere in the bracket. In 1990, they end up playing Duke. And you know, Duke is everybody's darling, Coach K and the Blue Devils, and you know, I'll leave it right there. But everybody wants to see Duke do well, even if they lose. At that time, they had a string of going to the Final Four several years in a row, but they had yet to break through to win a championship. Well, in that run, they ran into UNLV, and from the opening tip, it was a whitewash. UNLV outran them, made them look bad, made them look slow. Any kind of way you can beat a team in basketball, Vegas did that to Duke that night. They ended up beating them 103-73, and that was in Denver, by the way. And the problem is they talked a little trash after the game. I remember Larry Johnson specifically saying, "You can call us what you want, but you call us national champions." And he was right because they're always calling UNLV the thugs and they're this and they're that, but they were always a pretty good basketball team. And when they destroyed Duke that night and said what they said on national TV, and by the way, Hunt had Bobby Hurley turning colors. Later they would say he was sick. He wasn't sick. He was sick of Hunt dogging him out is what it was. And I guess the committee didn't like that. So me knowing that they're only losing one or two players. I know they lost Butler, their center, David Butler, Moses Scurry, and a couple other guys, that they can replace. So when they came back, I figured they were going to come back and go all the way to the national championship. Sure enough, they ran the table. They were undefeated going into the tournament that year. And when the brackets came out, what happened? Well, if you look behind me, this is the Western bracket from that year. Don't look too daunting when you look at the scores, but this is a severely loaded bracket. They called Montana State, I believe, was the first round. And no, it was Montana. Beat them by 30, I believe. And then in the second round, guess who they got? They got Georgetown. This isn't today's Georgetown. That was John Thompson's Georgetown. And on that team specifically, they had Alonzo Mourning and Mutombo, Twin Towers. An extremely formidable front line, especially for Vegas, because they weren't quite built that way. Yes, they were very athletic with Augmon and Johnson down low, and George Ackles, who I like a whole lot. But those two guys for Georgetown were a huge problem. And the way the refs were calling it, it was nip and tuck there for a good little while. But finally, they were able to separate just a little bit to get by that particular game. But then they said, well, if you can get by Georgetown, we got Utah waiting on you in the Sweet 16. Rick Majerus, who was a pretty good coach at the time, he had Utah playing some pretty good basketball, but Vegas were able to separate from them and beat them a little bit more than how they beat Georgetown. But the surprise of the bracket, Arizona was supposed to be there to beat UNLV in the regional final. But Terry DeHare and Seton Hall had other ideas. They ended up knocking Arizona off, and they didn't back down a bit from playing UNLV in the regional finals. Vegas was the superior team. They was the superior team of everybody that year, but the whole bracket was stacked to wear them down and get them knocked out before they reach the Final Four. Very possible because, like I say, Vegas has a history of blowing it in the NCAA tournament. So why not this undefeated team? Doesn't matter if you're perfect. All it takes is one game. Not like it's baseball or NBA basketball where you can blow 3 games and still win the championship. This particular case, it takes one bad night and you're done. So when I think about how Vegas got their bracket stacked, it's the same kind of thing that Iowa is dealing with. Here's Caitlin Clark. She did all that trash talking during the tournament last year. She breaks the women's scoring record. She breaks Pete Maravich's scoring record. And she's making all this money as NIL. Whether people say it or not, they have larceny for a lot of these guys, a lot of these players, because the situations that they're in. So what did the NCAA tournament do? They won't admit it, but they stack the bracket. They want to see Iowa get knocked off. So if Iowa wants to make it to the championship, they're going to have to come through a treacherous field. But just like Vegas talked all that trash, they stacked the bracket and they did the same thing to Iowa, and it was done on purpose. Now, did Vegas win the championship that year? No. Now, before I even get to that, I told you that I had a feeling that they were going to make it to the Final Four. And the Final Four in 91 was held in Indianapolis in the old Hoosier Dome. I just happened to apply to get tickets because at that time they had announcements on the bottom of the screen where you can apply in by telephone or mail or some kind of way. Whatever the way, I ended up getting 2 tickets and I ended up going to that game. So when Vegas got to Indianapolis, they started out with a rematch against Duke after Kansas played North Carolina in the first game. And that was one of those marathon games where the master Dean Smith took on his pupil Roy Williams, and Roy Williams ended up upsetting Dean Smith in a very, 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 very long game. So that ended up going Kansas' way, and sitting there waiting for him would be the winner of the Duke UNLV game. Now, Duke jumped out of the gate on Vegas, and it kind of got a little lead that most people never had. And they played way over their head that night. And then they got some timely calls, and they were able to keep pace with Vegas all night. It was more personal to Duke because they got obliterated the year before in the championship game, and they didn't want that to happen again, so they had to come out fast. And another thing that helped Duke that night, Robert Bricky was playing some good basketball, but they had the addition of Grant Hill. Grant Hill was a new player for Duke that year. Hold on a second. Yeah. So again, Grant Hill was a freshman that year, and he gave them the extra step that they needed to keep up with Vegas that night. But still, it took some timely plays on the part of Duke to stay in the game. And with about 4 minutes left, the quarterback of the team, Greg Anthony, he fouls out on a charge, and I still hadn't figured out what he was trying to do. But I was upset because I'm sitting high on top of it, and it looked like that the guy was in his way. But when you look at the film, that was clearly a charge, and you couldn't understand what Anthony was doing. It put you in the mind that sometimes these games are fixed because they were doing things that just didn't make sense. Like in the end, Duke took the lead on some Christian Laettner free throws, and they came down to the end where Larry Johnson got the ball. He tried to keep the ball out of Hunt's hand, and Anthony was out of the game, so they were a little bit out of sorts. But not Anthony, but Johnson had a chance, had a wide open three. He didn't make it. It looked like he was out of sorts when he took it. I don't know if he was freezing up or what he was doing, but you know from his NBA career, Larry Johnson can make those shots. So you wonder about, are these games fixed? Because even though Duke played well over their head that night, it was clear that Vegas is the better team. But remember, all it takes is one game, and Duke played that one game. But later on, Anderson Hunt got hit with a accusation of what do you call it, point shaving. So if he got hit with the point shaving and that's true, then there's your explanation for why UNLV did not win the championship that year. They only lost one game, and that was in the semifinals against Duke. But were they the best team? Absolutely. I can't say that Iowa is the best team. I think that Iowa is going to make it all the way to LSU. And I think they're going to give LSU a better game than they gave them last year. But in the end, I don't see anybody beating South Carolina. They were the best team last year. Iowa came up with some gimmicks last year to knock off South Carolina. Mainly, they threw the Johnson woman off. by leaving her wide open. She didn't know how to handle that. And she, to her credit, she acknowledged along those lines that she didn't quite handle that situation correctly. But I tell you what, if the opportunity presented itself again, I expect to see a different result from Raven Johnson if they leave her alone to shoot again. But as far as the journey goes, because it only takes one loss, it doesn't matter who you're playing against. Ask Virginia men. They went undefeated, not undefeated, but they were the number one seed a few years back and got beat. It goes that way sometimes. Purdue, the same thing last year. And those kind of things are going to keep on happening as long as you have the more balancing of teams taking place. The NIL money, where players can go anywhere, and any old team might just pop up and win the championship. I'm waiting for one of my HBCUs to put together a Fab Five team and make a great run. Think it's impossible? Not at all. Money talks, baby. And you can't get all the players because there's only so many players you get on the team. So if I'm not happy with you and you don't want to play, but I'm not going to sit on the bench. I'm going to go over here, play, and get paid. But as far as our women go, if you just look at that bracket, that is the bracket from the 1990 Western Region, where UNLV repeated as Western Region champions, but it was a stacked bracket, and I was going to have to do the same thing if they want to return to the national championship game. But that's just my thoughts on it. What say you about that? This has been Sports for Real.